Hey everyone, welcome to PunkCast. My name is William Maxwell. I'm a student of Web3 and the owner of Punk8095 CryptoPunks are 10,000 uniquely generated characters stored permanently on the Ethereum blockchain. No punk is the same. This is a show dedicated to celebrating the punks behind the punk. My hope for this podcast is that we capture the essence of the punk culture, elevate the brand and the individual behind the punk. One last thing. Projects discussed on the show is not financial advice. Crypto and NFTs are a volatile and risky asset class. Please always do your own research. Other than that, let's go. Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of PunkCast. Today we're featuring Punk8095. He's a 3 Addy with vampire hair, shadow beard, and pirate eye patch. He's a co-founder of Collectors Corner, a community focused on collecting the best digital art. Let's extend a warm welcome to our guest, AstamCloud. Astam, how are you, man?
I'm doing great. Super excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Likewise, man. It was nice to finally connect in New York, man. Like, I was probably always a little bit curious about who AstamCloud was, because I remember your name floating around in Moonbird days.
Yeah, that's right. I agree. It was super nice. And I will say we met at NFTsThe, and this was the first punks brunch I went. I think this is my third one, but it was the first one where I started to feel like, oh, I actually kind of know people. And I felt like it was really good vibes, maybe less crowded than others because of the weather and the market, which perhaps helped.
Yeah, tell me about it. It just felt like it was all doom and gloom in some ways for NFTsThe. I mean, the markets were down. It was rainy and cold for the whole week. And then we got that earthquake going along as well. So,
yeah,
that was good.
I almost forgot about the earthquake. It delayed my flight out, actually.
Oh, really? Oh, man. Well, mate, welcome to PunkCast. I'd love to sort of, unpack your story. I think maybe we could just start with, I guess, the story behind your handle. Like, how did you come up with AstamCloud?
Yeah, I feel like I'm not very good at naming things, including my fake name. And when I was really starting to get into crypto Twitter, I saw that everybody had pseudonyms, and I thought, well, that's like the thing to do. In fact, I don't know if it's changed, but it felt like it was weird to have your real name. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll come up with something. And I had actually just been to Nepal. I sort of did like a self-sabbatical for a few weeks, and I caught the second wave of COVID and got stuck there for like 3 weeks. And I was planning to be on Nepal anyways, but I got stuck in this like very small village that was like sort of converted into an Airbnb for trekkers coming back from some of the Himalayan treks. It was like a little family that owned it, and that town was called Astam, and it was something like, I want to say like 10,000 feet in the Himalayas in the background, and you wake up and just kind of like be in the middle of the clouds and see the mountains and stuff. So I just went with that. I went with the feeling that memory gave me, and just kind of stuck. Well, and you know how it is. Like once you start, it's weird. It's even weirder to change it. So
What were you doing in Nepal? Like, is it like a pilgrimage, a spiritual one or something? Or
yeah, I mean, so we'll get into it a little bit about my story, but I have been for a long time trying to search for what resonated with me. And by that, I mean kind of like career wise, but I don't really think of it as career. It's kind of like you spend your time, you're doing something. It's more than necessarily how you make money, or at least it is for me. And I was basically I was on this path to becoming a dermatologist, and I wasn't really know how I felt about it. And I had like some time off, and I was thinking about doing a vinyasa. No, not vinyasa. What's the word? I can't remember the word of it, but there are these like retreats that it's kind of like the standardized program. You go for 10 days. They have these centers all over the world, but it started in India. I can't believe I'm blanking on the name of it, but you literally sit in there for 10 days. You don't talk to anybody. You eat their food. You're not even supposed to look at other people. And so I was like, well, I kind of want to do something like that, but that sounds pretty intense. And I thought, well, maybe I could do a hybrid. I kind of do it myself. I feel like it was more about self-reflection, getting away from it all. And by the way, I was like the happiest I've ever been in my life. It was kind of crazy, like stripping away all the, like the saying we have, touching grass, but to the extreme.
Crazy. So wait, so what do you do? You're there for 10 days and you just you don't talk to anybody. You're not looking at anybody. Like, is that what you do?
Yeah, so there are these meditation retreats, and it's kind of like a standardized program. And I guess you watch like a video every day, like some teaching, and you have like a teacher, like a more advanced person who does this there with you, and you basically do a series of meditations, whether it's like a sitting meditation or a walking meditation. Obviously no phones, nothing like that. It's just supposed to be a period of self reflection, and of course there are some people like monks who live like that all the time, but I guess it's kind of like a time to introspect and all that. And apparently, it's very hard for people. Well, not everybody, but some people break down crying and whatever. And so I don't know. I still think about this, by the way, not necessarily a 10-day, but I'm like, well, maybe I'll just go rent an Airbnb, go in the cabins, and like spend 4 days and just kind of by myself thinking about stuff and see what emerges.
Wow. Did anything emerge? Sorry, I'm just super curious, man. Like, I think I'd really struggle with doing it. Maybe it's something I should probably do.
Well, I mean, look, I don't think you have to go from 0 to 10 days, right? Like, I think you could start slow, and see. But for me, I think a couple things really. I mean, the probably the biggest takeaway was that so much of the stress and stuff is choices of things that you feel like you need to do, and once you stop doing them, you feel a lot better. I think certainly like lifestyle wise, like over there, hiking a couple hours a day, doing yoga for like an hour every day, sleeping well. Uh, and granted, I wasn't working, so it's easier if you're not working, right? But overall, I would say that um, you know there was that, and I think this other notion of I think you get a sense of like what matters to you. You get a little bit more in touch with your intuition, and for me, it was things like family, things like working on something, spending my time on something I find meaningful, and I think the other thing is another thing we talk about a lot is community, right? It's kind of like spending your time with good people, and just kind of following your intuition with that. And like maybe you turn down a job that seems exciting, but it's like there's another offer, or your current company, you just really like the people, like that kind of a message, if you want to translate it into like something practical.
Oh man, that's cool. Yeah, well, I could probably talk all day about this, but yeah, would love to maybe take this conversation offline. But maybe we start with a little bit about your background, Astam. Like, where'd you grow up? What did you sort of study, and how did you everything sort of leading up to sort of crypto. Um, I know you mentioned dermatology. But,
Yeah, sure. um, so I am from a Indian family. My family immigrated to actually first the UK when I was 2, and then the US when I was 6. And so, for anyone listening who maybe is Indian or even Asian, whatever, growing up in the U.S., you kind of have like a similar story in terms of like your parents, the way they are, like kind of you self-select for certain types of people to come over. So I grew up like that. And I actually grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah. So from when I was 6 until I went to college, which was fine, actually. I think as a kid, you just don't notice what it's not like I was missing New York City, and later finding out I'm living in maybe a less exciting place. And then I went to college in California, in Los Angeles, studied engineering and psychology, biomedical engineering, and then I went on to medical school in the East Coast in Philadelphia. And for me, I was always very interested in innovation and change. And at some point, I got the idea that like the best way to do that is through business. And so I wanted to learn a little bit more about business, and for a number of reasons, wasn't as excited about being a doctor. So I actually took a break, or really, I graduated and then I went to work in management consulting. And that was when, through the network and people I was meeting there, met a friend who introduced me really to crypto and Bitcoin. and followed along for a few years, just working there. Switched companies at some point. I won't go through it all, but like I started like a nutritional snack food company. I was doing a lot of independent consulting. And so really I would say a lot of like business, health technology type of work in like product and operations. And then, you know, I decided that I wanted to still do innovation, but within healthcare. Actually went back and did some training, got licensed as a physician. And then I had kind of this break before going into dermatology. And during that break is when I ended up really diving deeper into Web3 and more of the communities. I've been following Web3 for a while, and we can talk more about that. I actually met some of the early consensus folks. I'm sure a lot of punk holders out there, but ended up going back to the medicine route and then circling back to Web3. Felt like I missed a lot. I totally checked out in 2018 after round tripping generational wealth, as the story is very common for a lot of folks. And then, I went to dermatology after this Nepal trip. I was actually there for about half a year, and then had my family needed some help, so I took a break. Went back, was just doing some consulting work on the side, like health tech consulting, and ultimately decided, you know what, like this just like isn't for me, dermatology. And then I decided, it just really fell in love with generative art, honestly. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that. And decided that I wanted to give it a go, full time Web3. Like I didn't, back in 2017, after the market crashed in 2018, I wasn't as plugged in, and also it just felt like you didn't know about crypto. Like you didn't know if it was going to come back, or maybe it was just me because it was my first cycle, my first bear market. Uh, so I kind of like just checked out of it. And this time, and I regretted that when I came back, because I was like, wow, so much happened that I just totally missed, and I didn't want to miss anything this time. And it's like been very clear to me since early 2017 that like crypto's the future. I have a lot of thoughts on this that we could go into. I mean, I hear a lot of stuff in discords these days, like, "Oh, crypto's only ever going to be for gambling." I just think it's absurd. Like that's like in the early days of the internet, saying it's only going to be for blogs or something. It's like, come on. So, anyways, I'm not trying to be, rude, but I think that to me, it's going to take a while, but it's just so obviously going to change the whole world in my mind that I wanted to stay around. And I then found the art stuff and just started Collector's Corner. And we started that really just scratching my own itch. I was trying to invest in art and generative art, and then I really got into it and I just consumed as much content as I could find. And I just wanted to know more. And at some point, I was talking to a friend I'd met through Proof, Jared. It was by Jared _ pause online, big squiggle guy, squiggle PFP. And we were just talking about this stuff like offline. Just this first person I called on Web3, like that was weird. First time, like breaking the anonymity. But we were just having these conversations, like, why don't we just record them? So we started doing that. And it went, first we were doing deep dives into collections we really liked, Fidenzas, Ringers, Anticyclones, a lot of those classic art blocks ones. And then, realized that like I used to listen to Bankless, and I really liked their weekly updates. I just felt like I could keep up with stuff that mattered. I was like, well, maybe we should try that, do a weekly update for the art side. And that got a lot more attention, and that was exciting. I was like, well, maybe this is something I could do full time. Not knowing that we were going to enter a terrible bear market for art NFTs. So I went full time Collector's Corner in January 23. So I guess it's been now over a year. And the first 6 months is just really trying to figure out business model. Like, how can I keep doing this and pay the bills? I was doing consulting work on the side to make it work. And the way I think about a content business is you are either going to be in advertising or sponsorships, or you're going to have some kind of subscription membership. I know in Web3 we do a lot of these like Kickstarter type things where you sell something and then presumably you will keep making money. But I think that's, at least to me, I don't think that model is proven to work. I think you need something that people are going to willing to pay for time, like month to month or whatever the period is. And if you sell them a pass for like $2,000 up front, like, I just don't think a lot of people are going to be willing to pay more into that. So, long story short, I pivoted to a subscription model. So now we have a members only subscription service. We have a private Discord for that, and I make content that is much more investor focused, because my broader thesis around all of the Web3 art world has been that, you know, a lot of people treat these like investments, and there wasn't content that could help you make those investment decisions. So that was like the genesis, the idea, even before it was a business. And then my thought was, people still want to invest in this, they want to keep up with it. And there's the disparity between how much people talk about the investment side privately and publicly is so massive. It was like crazy to me. Like everyone, it felt like to me they were adopting this principle from the traditional art world, where you don't really talk about the money and the finances so much. But then, it's a hyper financialized culture coming off of like a new financial system being built, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and all these other cryptocurrencies. So it's like everybody like found it through that. So it felt weird to me. And I was like, I feel like we should be able to talk about this. We should be able to say like, hey, this art is nice, but I don't think it's a great investment for X, Y, or Z reason. Um, so anyways, created that private membership, and that has been going really great. I mean, even though the market's been down, we found a lot of fantastic opportunities. I think almost everybody's made money in there. I don't want to speak for everybody, but like, we've certainly, I won't go too far into the philosophy, but a lot of this stuff comes down to like power laws or Lindy, right? Like these terms that we use, which basically says that the winners win big in the space. And you see this all over the place, right? Like the top, I don't know who the top Instagram influencer is. Like, let's say it's Kim Kardashian, but like Kim has like an outsized influence compared to the vast majority of influencers. Or you look at Mr. Beast on YouTube or whatever. And that's kind of how attention tends to congregate, and then people want the thing that's more status. And so my thinking with this has always been like, it's okay if we miss a bunch of stuff, right? And you don't even have to be really early, right? Like, but imagine you could see CryptoPunks and buy them at 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 ether. Like, that's still really fantastic. No matter how you look at it. If you're looking at it as an investor, it's fantastic. If you're looking at it like, hey, I want to hold some cultural stuff I never want to sell, fine. Like, wouldn't you rather pay 2 ETH than 20? So no matter what your motivations are, I think figuring out what's interesting, what's innovative, what might be culturally relevant early is part of what we're trying to do. And part of the fun is you see all sorts of new innovations coming in. So that's really the focus. It's like, let's find the most interesting stuff as early as possible. And we're going to miss a lot of things, but we don't, you don't want to find punks when they are whatever at 50 ether, right? It's like, let me figure it out and understand why I might want one much earlier. Even if you heard about it at half an ether and you faded it, it's like, well, let's at least get in at 5 before 50. That's the
Yeah.
mindset.
Yeah. Man, there's a lot of stuff to unpack here, and I want to circle back around to collector's corner, because there's a lot of stuff I probably want to ask you, and maybe you're gonna have to give away some free alpha on Punkcast today. Um, but um, but man, so there's so many parts to your sort of backstory I find super interesting. I mean, from your medical background to consulting to your entrepreneurial journey to your entry in sort of Web3. But maybe what one question I always ask guests as well is like, of all things you could have studied and tried to pick up, like, why did you choose the medical route for you?
Oh, because I'm Indian. No, I'm just kidding. Um, I think there's a little bit of that, like a lot of family of doctors. And in India, when my parents were growing up, and even when I was young and visiting, it was kind of like, are you going to be an engineer or a doctor? That very practical jobs in a highly competitive society. Um, so I think I chose engineering because I really like math, but I wanted a practical application of math. And I actually wasn't even pre-med initially. I just chose biomedical for a random reason. And where in my school, they basically said after, within the first year, you can easily switch. And then I ended up getting really good grades, and people were like, "Oh, maybe you should think about going to med school." But in my mind, I always had the idea that I wanted to do business. But I naively thought, well, if I do business in healthcare, then it'll be helping people, and that's better than whatever businesses that are just like evil and profit motivated. And that's naive because you have both good and bad businesses in any industry. So that's how I ended up doing that. Psychology, I just found it interesting, honestly, and it was like so much easier than engineering. I can't even like literally. It was like an order of magnitude easier than the engineering classes. So it was almost like learning for fun for me to do that part of it.
Cool. Well, and so did you started off in medicine and then transitioned to management consulting, or was that you
That's right.
basically started? Yeah. Okay. Cool. How did you find management consulting?
So I worked at a company called Boston Consulting Group, and I say that because different consulting firms have different styles. The one that I was at was like super intense, and I think I think of it as like boot camp. Like it was really good. It was hard. It was like my very first job ever to go into like 50-hour weeks and traveling 4 days a week and all that. Like the learning curve was really steep, but I feel like I just got really, really, really good business training, and so I'm very glad for it. I think that job, if I'm sure it's the same for most jobs. Like if you have a good manager, a good team, it can be great, and if you don't, it can be pretty bad. So at least we switch projects. So some projects are better than others. But ultimately, I decided to leave that because I was still really interested in innovating and finding newer, better ways to do things. And most of our clients were massive companies that are incumbents trying to defend their position. So they're usually not as interested in innovation. And maybe it's changing now as it's becoming more of a thing, or people are realizing you have to disrupt yourself to survive. But back then it was a little bit less so, and especially in healthcare, which is where I was slotted coming in with a medical degree.
Mm, gotcha. No, BCG is a top tier consulting firm, man. So I think they only hire the big giga brain. So I say I say a lot about you. Um, and then just quickly around your nutritional snack food startup, like what was that like? What were you looking to do there?
Yeah, so I will get like a tiny bit into the U.S. healthcare system. So the U.S. healthcare system is one of the most expensive in the world, and the outcomes are not that great. And this is actually true of most healthcare systems. Is that they general principle is if you prevent a disease, it is way way cheaper than trying to fix it once it's occurred, especially a chronic disease. So think like diabetes, heart disease, cancer, whatever, right? And my research into this made it pretty clear that a lot of this has to do with food, the food system. But I should back up. I co-founded this. I didn't start it from the very beginning, but I joined someone who had founded the company, and I just thought the concept was great. And the idea was like, look, people are not going to stop eating junk because they like it. Can you make the junk food healthier? And the answer is yes, you can. And so it was like a specific niche, but this idea that you could take something that we just assume automatically is unhealthy and make it healthy, I like that idea a lot because people struggle with behavioral change. So that was the concept. It's a tough slog. I mean, it essentially falls into the consumer packaged goods industry unless you can get healthcare insurance reimbursement, which takes a long time and it's not easy to do. So you realize it's not quite the same type of business. But I think that I think eventually that is where things will go. I mean, I think ultimately all governments will be forced to seriously look at this as healthcare costs like keep rising.
Gotcha. Um, and then talk to us about your entry into crypto. You said somebody at the consulting firm sort of introduced you to crypto, and you sort of round tripped in 2018. But what was your sort of entry into it, and how did you make of the whole sort of scene at the time?
Yeah. So my buddy at BCG told me about crypto. I was like back in 2015. Like I remember I was buying some Bitcoin in 2015 for like $300 on Coinbase, but like I didn't really get it, and I just didn't understand how the financial system worked and why Bitcoin was potentially better. So then I actually had like kind of a snafu with Coinbase and ended up like selling all my stuff, which is like $330, right? Like 10% gain. And look back on that painfully. But then in late 2016, I remember there was potentially, I want to say it was a Bitcoin ETF or something that came up the first time. And I was talking to that same friend, and I went on Coinbase, and Ethereum was there. There was only two coins you could buy back then. And I was like, what is that? I didn't really know what it was. And then a few weeks later, my friend had bought XRP, and it went ballistic price wise. So that got my attention a bit. And then I happened to go to a bachelor party a few weeks later, maybe it was like February 2017. And one of the guys there, my friend's friend, he was one of the first employees at Consensus, like first 20, maybe first 10, something. And for folks listening who don't know, Consensus was kind of like the consulting slash business arm of the Ethereum Foundation. It was a separate private company, but started by this guy, Joe Lubin, who was one of the creators of Ethereum. And so, he and I were talking about it, and I was like, okay, this is like kind of interesting. And I was living in New York at the time. Their office was in Brooklyn. And when we came back, I checked it out, and it was kind of like that startup story of a bunch of, people like grinding it out in a room. I was like, okay, something's going on here. And then I looked into Ethereum and I really researched it, and that I kind of like opened up the light bulb. And then I went back and I really learned about Bitcoin. And as I kind of started to understand it, I was like, it felt like to me that it was inevitable. So I pretty much I pretty much went all in. It didn't help that the bull run was like really heating up then. Like I remember I was like transferring money using ACHs to like these Bitstamp, like in Slovenia. I was like, what? I don't know what the hell I'm doing here. And in that time, I was like trying to get my money in. Like Ethereum went from like 40 to 80. It like really started moving, and I was like, wow, this is kind of nuts. And then kind of caught up in all that euphoria. But back then, and this is what I was alluding to earlier. Like I was really into those supply chain tokens because I knew that problem. I was like kind of coming off of that consumer packaged goods business, and actually, I was doing it at the time, and there's so many things that would work more efficiently with crypto that I think it's just going to happen. I mean, like there are economic pressures, there are incentives to try to create new companies to do these things. And I feel like a lot of times when people are talking about crypto, Bitcoin, they'll be like, well, why can't we do that now? And it's like, look, a lot of innovations are not about, doing something completely new. It's about doing something that you've done before, cheaper, faster, better. I mean, that's like AI. We're talking about replacing knowledge workers. Well, obviously, people are doing that work right now. So nobody's saying, oh, like, why is AI so cool? Like, we already do that. But people seem to use that argument for crypto a lot. And I don't, it's not really the point, in my opinion. So once I saw that, I was like, this is happening, right? I would say it's happened a lot slower than I thought, but now it feels like it's speeding up a little bit. And I'm of the viewpoint that like crypto is going to rearrange many industries, potentially all of them, even healthcare. Like I see how it is going to happen, and I think that's pretty exciting.
Yeah. No, I'm in the same boat as well with you. Um, and how did you get into NFTs? Like, what was your first NFT?
Oh man, I saw this question when you sent it to me, and I was trying to remember. I tell you like some of my first ones. I think the first one I bought was actually an art NFT, and I just got completely annihilated. Like I think I basically like I was just starting to get on Twitter, hadn't gotten in Discords yet, and somebody posted about Avid lines, and I like bought the top. I remember I bought this thing for like 20 ETH, and
Shit.
like yeah, I later sold it for half an ETH. I don't know when it was, like a year later, something terrible like that. And I then I bought a ape. I remember it like NFT NYC just happened. I think it was like the first one where people were like really excited in like 2021. And I just saw somebody tweet about like there was this huge line at the party and the mutant apes had just come out or something, and it was like 3 ether, and I was like, okay, I'll buy a couple of these. And I was just like, again, like I'm not a good trader. Like I had just been parked in ETH from still in 2017. Like I just kept all my money in. I put more in when ether was like $200, and I wrote all that up. So I was a little bit late for some of these NFTs, but and then I actually bought a bunch of Solana NFTs because they had just launched. I think Magic Eden had just opened, and there's all this stuff that came out. I bought one of those like SMBs, Solana Monkey businesses, and stuff. But then I didn't really buy a lot of NFTs until I learned about art and was kind of like following along with Proof. Like I found Kevin Rose, his podcast, and I almost minted the proof pass. Like literally, I was about to do it, and I was at a restaurant, and I went to the bathroom. I came back and I minted out, and I was like, oh, like I was like one tier in the Dutch auction away from buying it, and that probably would have been a great move. I ended up buying it later because I was just like listening to the content about art, and I think that I just was really drawn to NFTs because I had been in this DeFi world where I was just getting wrecked, man. Like I didn't have a chance. Like, I didn't have the informational advantage. I felt like half these protocols, they're so convoluted, or at least they don't explain what they're doing very well. Or maybe they're doing nothing, but you like don't really know what's going on. And you don't have the ability to diligence it unless you're like, I mean, it's just very hard. You have to be like super tech. You probably need a team to like truly diligence multiple of these platforms. And long story short, I felt like it was unfair, and I was getting dumped on by VCs who bought it at 100th the price. So I was like, you know what? Like, at least this NFT game is art game. At least I can understand it and have a chance as an investor looking to get some alpha beyond Ethereum, or even at least some beta. And then I just started really liking the art, and like that's when I would say I really got into NFTs, is when I really got into Proof, was starting to talk to people and like starting to understand art. I also want to shout out Grayler's DAO. I bought a Grayler's DAO token, and that was like a fantastic place to be to keep learning more, and particularly like generative art.
Yeah. No, man, Proof was a vibe in the early days, man. And man, that what a journey. A disappointing one for me personally as well. But I remember those early days in Proof. It was a really good vibe, and we can shit on Kevin, but I think you're right. I think his podcasts with early days with DC Investor and Def Beef and all those guys really opened up my eyes to the whole art space in some ways too. Did you have an art background, or did you collect art before crypto at all?
No, not at all. Like nothing. Um, I I'm one of those people who initially came for the money and just kind of fell in love with the art. Is what I would say. And by the way, I want to echo what you're saying about Kevin Rose. I know there's a lot of negativity about him, and no need to get into that. I'm sure some of it is justified, but he really did bring a lot of light to the space, especially the art space. And I think I'm noticing his absence right now. I think it would have been nice to have him continue and stick around, and maybe he will come back for more of the art side, perhaps not the full Web3 experience. I hope he does.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, such a painful journey. But yeah, I'm with you. Um, in terms of Gen Art, what was it about Gen Art that and this specific sort of genre of you know NFTs that piqued your interest?
Yeah, so I would say for most of the things that I follow, I find myself liking it or being drawn to it, and then I try to back into why, the logic. So we'll have to take it from a grain of salt. Like I'm trying to interpret my feelings here, but I think what it is it felt like a really good mix between the left brain and the right brain. So the left brain being more analytical, right being more aesthetic, qualitative, and in that you still had this beautiful art, but it was code based, so that felt like more of a science techie thing. And then you have these collections that are have all these different kind of traits and categories, and you can explore them and figure out what you like, and even come up with a point of view as to like what you think is going to be good. Right? It was actually a lot of fun, even when I didn't buy stuff, to just see what was coming out in a collection and be like, oh, I bet you people like this style or that style or whatever. And then I think I had also not previously experienced this concept of networked art. So the idea that art that comes in a collection or some kind of network is more engaging, captures attention better, is a better experience for collectors. And I think generative art in the way that art blocks did it. Oh, and also the random mint that was like really cool, and the idea that you didn't know what you were going to get and you had a hand in it. All of that was just really, really, it was fun. I liked it a lot. And then there was like the investment potential, at least, okay, well, maybe I can collect some of the stuff and make money too. Like that'd be fun. And it's like it beats trying to diligence a company when thinking about an investment for sure. So yeah, I think it was all of those things. And even now, like I'm not a big one of one art collector. I still prefer the network stuff. And I really do prefer one of X. I think like that was a really cool concept to me. And again, I think code based gen art really lead, leads itself to that, like this idea that everything's unique but part of a set. And I just think like people like to feel unique, and you're really personalizing it by making it both the fact that you and I could never have the same fidenza, but also maybe you really like spirals and I really like micros, and in that way I get to get something that feels a little more personal to me, not too different than how people do with punks. Obviously it's
Yeah,
different because it's an avatar, but similar concept.
no, for sure. No, I'm with you, man. I think Gen Art's a really it's one of those art genres that really leverage the blockchain to its full potential, right? Smart contracts, algos, all those mechanisms really come to life with Gen Art for sure. Um, so, so who's your favorite artist though? I'm curious to who's your favorite artist? Who's
The
your
part.
what's your
Oh
sort of
yeah.
favorite collections in the Gen Art space?
So my favorite artist is William Upon, like hands down. I think he's the best generative artist, just purely. And I know that a lot of people probably won't like that. Perhaps some other generative artists. It's okay. We all have our opinions on this. There's no truth in art either. Um, Anticyclone is my favorite collection. That was the one that really tipped me over, and I went. I lost discipline and bought like a ton of those. Uh, I just think Mapan is his aesthetic is so smooth, and he just comes out with. I don't think any other generative artist has had three really, really, really good collections. And I would argue them upon as more. Maybe it's not like consensus views, but Dragons, his first one on Tezos, I think is amazing. Anticyclone, I think is amazing. I think like I actually, I mean, I like all of them, but you go down the list, like I don't think any other artist has been able to vary styles and still continue to release really, really, really high quality work in long form gen art, no less. Um, but I like a lot of it, to be honest with you, even stuff that isn't necessarily worth a lot of money. It's hard, man. Like I could go down the list. I guess if you have to put a gun in my head, um, the other the other one I want to throw out there is not even like code generative art. It's AI art. I've been obsessed with this post photography AI art. I love Rope Renisto's work. Life in West America is one of my favorite collections, and that was a big unlock for me in terms of the aesthetic that I'd never seen before. That really resonated with me. But you know, um, man, it's really hard for me to pick like other gen art. Like I could go down the list. Like Gazers is awesome. Ringers is amazing. I like Finger Code's work a lot. He recently released something in Bright Moments Venice that I thought was a really great collection. So there's just so many, and I realized early on that there's so many talented and really good artists. Like that's not even the real challenge. I think the challenge is attention, honestly.
Yeah. So where do you think we go from here? I know like ETHNFTs haven't been doing that great. to date, I think most of the attention's flowed to ordinals and Solana and meme coins and the like. But what do you sort of see ahead for, I guess, ETHNFTs?
Yeah, I mean, so I think that it's going to be a little bit binary. And I think that the collections and the art and the artists that continue to, how to put this, like, I think this is relative rankings, right? So I think at some point interest will come back in art. I don't see why that would change. Uh, and I don't know if it's going to go up in ETH value or not. It's hard to say, right? Some things probably will, and most things probably won't. Is likely what happens. But I think with anything that is quality, the balance always comes back. So as Warren Buffett has this great quote. I think it's Warren Buffett. It might have been Benjamin Graham, his mentor. He says, in the short term, the stock market is a voting machine. So it's kind of like what's popular, narrative, what's hot. In the long term, it's a weighing machine, right? So it's like whatever has substance will end up winning. And a good analogy for crypto folks, just look at Bitcoin. Go look at coin market cap, what coins were out in 2012, and see how many of them you've ever even heard of now, right? There's very few. There's like three, basically, maybe four, something like that. And I think we should expect the same thing to happen as the level of talent increases, both for artists and also teams, whether you're thinking about like a PFP or whatever. And inevitably, as more and more experiments happen, some of them are going to hit and unlock things, and those are going to gain more mind share than something that used to be interesting or popular. So I do think where a lot of stuff will kind of fade away, but I do think the genres will be fine, and certainly some collections, art, PFPs, whatever, will do really well. But I think right now what's happening is, and since there'll be a lot of punk listeners, I'd be curious to hear, what were CryptoPunks like in May of 2020, and a little bit skewed because there was the COVID crash. But my guess is like it wasn't that hot, and maybe the bigger difference is that there was no expectation that it was going to be booming while DeFi summer happened, or like that kind of a thing. So I think people still like art. I just think that most active participants in the space are much more short-term focused, and art is considered a little bit like long-term or something I buy once I've made it, and not something that I'm necessarily speculating on. It's like easier to do that on meme coins.
Well said. So I think it's what do we do? We just hold our bags until it all comes back.
Well, I mean, look, I think so. As always, are you looking at something as an investor or as a collector, right? And assuming the question is as an investor, because as a collector, you probably don't want to sell if you really like it. As an investor, I think you have to really honestly ask yourself, like, do I think this thing that I'm holding, and it doesn't matter if it's a DeFi token, it doesn't matter if it's a PFP, art collection, whatever, like, do I think it's really high quality and it's going to stay in that, top 5% of quality within that category? And if I don't think so, then you're probably better off with the ETH. I mean, ETH is a really good asset, all right? Or fine, convert it to Bitcoin if you want. Like, these are like some of the best financial assets like in the world right now. It's very hard to outbeat them, right? In anything. So I just think you have to really be honest with yourself, right, about that. And if you're not sure, maybe like sell some, hedge. But yeah, I mean, it depends on the collection. I can tell you what I personally think. But I would say right now, I do think we see a resurgence, and we've seen this a little bit, right? Alien punks selling for 4,000 ETH. We've seen some Fidenza sell, Autoglyph full set sold. So like at the top end, a bunch of X copies have been selling, Beeples. Like we're seeing some high end art sales, which to me means it's starting. But I don't know what everything will trickle down to. And I do think it'll be fairly concentrated at the top, and then people will jump on new things that feel like they have more potential, like a lot of this AI.
I'm with you. I think this might be the calm before the storm in some ways. There is a little bit of activity starting to brew. So maybe everyone's just quietly stacking cheap ETH right now. What was your journey into punks? Talk to me about that. Like when did you get your punk?
So I got my punk, I want to say, I think it was November of 2022, something like that. And I really wanted one because I just, to me, they are the best NFT collection, bar none. I don't think it's even close, personally. And I'm not just saying that because I'm on Punk's cast. Like, I really believe that they're considered art. They're the only PFP that doesn't need to do anything to hold value, and they're extremely innovative in a lot of different ways. So I knew that I wanted one, but I just I knew the market was tanking, and I wanted to be in USDC. So I was waiting until I felt like it bottomed, which was around November. Actually, Ethereum ended up bottoming in July of 22, but everybody thought that it was going to be whenever Bitcoin bottomed, which was actually later in November. So I basically converted all of my free USD into Ethereum, and I went shopping. Foolishly, I should have waited. It turns out, I bought a bunch of art and other stuff too. But yeah, that's why I was like, okay, it's time. And I was just kind of looking at, okay, what's the best near the floor, or something that resonates with me near the floor. Not necessarily the best, but some. Yeah, I wanted it to feel personal with the punk.
And talk to us about the traits that you're looking at. How did you come up with, I guess, 8095? Like, were you spending much time looking at the traits? Were there sort of other sort of potential traits that you were interested in?
You know, I think the traits that I was really interested in weren't really options. So I wanted a medical mask one, thought that'd be cool. And then hoodie. I think there's a question about like what my dream punk is. And like a hoodie, I was priced out of. And the medical masks one, there weren't that many, and I don't know if that's a popular trait, but they weren't really available. And I for sure wanted a brown skin one. Like I wanted one that felt like it was me. Um, and I wasn't necessarily drawn to the vampire here, but I liked the shadow beard on mine, and I didn't really think about it, but I kind of like the eye patch. Not that I like think of myself as a pirate or anything, but I don't know. I just like, and in this way, it's this weird thing where it's like this avatar. Assuming you can get the one that you really feel like it resonates with you, it like represents you more than your real face. It's like more the real you, and which is like kind of a funny, interesting thing about avatars and pseudonymity online. So yeah, I mean, I think I was just looking and I saw it and I was like, man, that one's really clean. I just like I wanted it, and I was like, man, this is like I just kept coming back to it, and it was above floor. I think the floor was like 60 to 65, and I bought it for 69. At the time,
Nice.
$80,000, so it wasn't too much in USD, but I mean, still a lot for a
Yeah,
JPEG.
there's something about the eye patch I really like too, man. It just makes it a little bit less serious in some ways, like a little part of the little quirky sort of collection that we are.
Yeah.
Really cool.
And I will say Raul Paul has one that's really similar to mine. It's just like another quirk of punks. I'm sure you feel it too. If you see someone who has like a similar punk to you, you kind of feel a connection.
He does, he does. You mentioned your dream punk. What sort of traits or do you have a dream punk in mind?
Yeah. I mean, I swear, I thought I saw one listed for cheap. That was like one of my dream punks, and it was gone. And if I was probably mistaken, it was a hoodie punk with glasses. I normally have like pretty thick glasses, and again, like a brown skin one because I would want that clean shaven. That's kind of like how I normally am, but I'm sure like all I just like hoodies, man. It's like I wear them all the time. I was actually just thinking like I need to get a summer hoodie because it's starting to get warm here, and I don't have a good one. But yeah, I don't know. It's just that felt like that's how I like to be. So that's a dream punk, even more so than a zombie or an ape or whatever. I think that's what I would want to hold.
No, hoodie punks are super cool, highly coveted too, and uh, held by some of the most esteemed people in Web3, I think. Um, uh, and how do you sort of see punks to you? I mean, like you come from a Gen Art, you love the Gen Art sort of piece. They sort of fall into the art category for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that there's so many conceptions of what art is, but we have many examples of pixel art, and I think in some ways it's I don't know. I mean, like I think it was art first, and then the utility appeared afterwards almost. I have to go back and read the story from the Law Labs guys again, but those guys are like they're artists. I mean, nobody questions autoglyphs made by the same people, right? So I think if you look at it from the standpoint of who made it, it looks like art. I think if you look at it from the standpoint of how it's been embraced by the art world, it's in museums, in art museums, and then I think just in some ways it's very interesting conceptually, as a lot of contemporary traditional art is. So yeah, in a lot of ways, I do think it's art, but it's both, right? Like it is to me, it is art. It is also a status symbol. It is also an avatar, like a representation of yourself. And for better or worse, right now the PFP is our quote unquote metaverse avatar right now.
Who's your favorite punk personality in the community?
Man, there's so many that are like kind of like funny and quirky. I'll just shout out a few because um, I mean favorite. Okay, so look, probably my favorite is like Punk6529 because I think I'm just like so impressed with him. Just I mean I don't really know much about him other than he has money and he writes and he has a hoodie punk, but like it's really hard to write and express thoughts as clearly as he does. And he's clearly thought about these things a lot, and he takes it to a place where like, I haven't really even thought about it. I'm like, wow, like this guy's like kind of not only like I think next level, but he's also really advocating for the space. Like, and I think he's been totally right about memes. He's been talking about memes for years, right? And now we're in like meme coin mania type of thing. So he's just super impressive. But there's so many that I like. I was thinking about saying like DC investor because he's kind of funny, but like he seems like an interesting guy. I think he was a management consultant as well, so there's that there. But it's almost hard to pick because so many of the personalities are punk holders.
Yeah.
Got the cabal, I guess.
Yeah, you picked probably two of the best there as well. And I think in some ways deeply aligned with ETH. And I think similar to you, I sort of got into the space through Bankless as well. So in some ways, maybe it's like, just one way sort of vision when it comes to sort of crypto and uh, what it sort of means. So very, very in that camp as well. Yeah, 6529's tweeted some bangers as well, right? So I've learned a lot from him. So yeah, you've picked a couple of really good punks. Um, and how would you describe punk culture for you?
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like I'm one of the like a relatively newer punk holder, and I don't spend a ton of time in the punks Discord. Well, I have looked here and there, but it's not really. Uh, I don't know how to put it. It's just it's not something where I jump in every day and like chat a lot. I think that punks culture it feels a little bit like rare Pepe culture to me. Like I've had the pleasure of getting to meet a bunch of rare Pepe collectors lately, and in that is what I mean is like it feels like a really well established community that's almost like tiered. And by tiered, I mean like you have people who are in super early and, probably like maybe they're not really active in the Discord or whatever, but you have almost like this old guard. And then you have people who were like early, but maybe not quite that early. And then you kind of have like the newer folks. And I think that there's not the same like excitement where there's a really new community and it's like almost like you're dating, right? It's like your new significant other and it's all super happy. Like it feels more like in the marriage stage where it's like stable and there's like a lot of nuance to it and there's a lot you can get out of it, but it's not like the honeymoon period. And I think you kind of have to put in a little bit of work to meet people and find people, but people are super open and wanting to connect and chat and all that. So that's in my mind. I'm calling this like a mature community, uh, but one that I think is still very valuable and has great members and all that.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you meet anybody interesting at Punk's Brunch?
Yeah, I met a few interesting folks. Well, one, I met folks who were really into art still, which was great to hear because you don't hear about it a lot in the timeline these days, like yourself. So that was really awesome. And I've met him before, but there's a guy named Sharon who's a punks holder, was an early punks claimer. Really like fascinating guy. He's like a filmmaker and like, very charming and stuff in person. And then I can't remember the gentleman's name or what he goes by online, but like I met this guy who, has started this like company that is helping keep policymakers in Washington on top of what's happening in crypto, and also help people understand what's happening in Bitcoin like policy. Um, I met a guy who was like a ex NFL player, like just really interesting variety of folks who were out there, and
Yeah, I think that was Flick, right? Um, I met him at Punk's Brunch and also your event. Was your event after Punk's Brunch?
yeah, it was the next day.
Yeah, no, that was cool too. So you had a few punks, a lot of familiar punk faces that turned up to Collector's Corner as well, and some pretty cool artists there as well. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that was awesome.
yeah. So I do remember the ex NFL player Flick. He was there, and it's kind of cool, right? We get like all sorts of people within sort of punks, athletes, doctors, entrepreneurs, VC guys, a whole bunch of people. So which and you're right, it's probably a mature-ish community. How do you feel about V1 punks?
I wasn't like active when all that was happening. I don't even know when it happened. And I don't know. I mean, I just think it is what it is, like with many things, what matters is what the social consensus forms around, not what was first or whatever. And once it's done, it's done, like I used the analogy, I think somebody was asking me about this recently. I used the analogy of like Ethereum Classic. Like, yeah, I don't want Ethereum Classic. Like, I don't really see what the difference is, and obviously the consensus has rallied around ETH, the the generic one. So I I don't even remember all of what happened. I think that kind of thing is always like unfortunate, especially if people lose money on it. But I think ultimately, like the social consensus is going to win out on these things. So I don't have a lot of emotion around it. I guess it's just like, oh, it is what it is.
Gotcha. Um, what about how do you feel about Yuga at the helm or stewarding? I guess the punks brand.
You know, it's actually something I never worried about. Like, I just never really felt like they could ruin it in the way that I heard people worrying about. Um, I think that and as time has gone on, I think that they've demonstrated that they kind of know that they don't need to do anything. Like it's a finished product in my mind. So I trust them that they are not going to really do anything that could cause issues with the Punks brand. And to be honest, I'm not even sure that even they could if they wanted to. Right? Like a worst case scenario is they're going bankrupt or whatever. They have to sell off their assets to appease their investors or whatever, pay some back, and they decide to sell the IP rights for punks. And okay, like they sell it to Disney and there's a bunch of punks cartoons. Like I don't know. Like I'm just not sure exactly how the brand gets tarnished and out does away with what we're talking like 7 years now of kind of network effect progress happening with all the holders. So I'm not personally concerned. Maybe I'm overly optimistic, but I don't worry about it.
No, I'm in your camp too. I think it's a finished product. Any whether it's you or anybody else trying to do stuff for punks, I think it's all net value accretive, right? I think if it's part of the attention game, it just draws a little bit more attention for us right now. I don't think there's any harm in that. And if you could pass on a message to the next owner of your punk, 8095, what would you like to say to him?
I would like to say enjoy it. I think it's a nice feeling, even though 99.99% of people have no idea that I have a CryptoPunk, and probably most of them don't care, even if they knew. um, it's just nice to feel like you have a piece of internet history. Honestly, I think eventually world history. And the other thing I would say is try to get plugged into the community sooner. I wish I had done that. Like really hopped in, met some people. I think really put in the work to take advantage of the community that's there.
Nice. Well said. Aston, this was a really fun conversation, man. I think this was a really great vibe to chat Gen Art with you in the depths of the bear market. I know there's not a lot of attention on ETHNFTs. Punks are sort of dropping quite a fair bit, but it's good to know that we can still have this chat regardless of bull or bear. So appreciate you coming on. Any sort of final comments from you, and maybe a final plug for Collectors Corner, and what's the best place for people to find you?
Yeah, yeah, and thank you for having me. Thank you for getting up early to chat with me. Um, so for Collectors Corner, the best thing to do is just reach out to me on Twitter. I'm at AstamCloud, and then we're at collectors_XYZ. You can also shoot an email, collectorscornernft@gmail.com. It's viable as well. And then, so that's the best place to find me. I think in terms of parting words, like I would encourage you, if you just want to learn about the art side, or if you want to invest in it, whatever your motivations are, just first of all, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help people like up to speed, understand whatever. Um, and just try to take the price and the uh, what feels like omnipresent need to make a return, and just try to learn about it, and try to just spend time with this stuff, not worrying about making money. I think you probably find it very relaxing, and you might actually really enjoy it, especially if you're someone who's been art exposed and focused and outside of Web3.
Awesome. I'll definitely put your handles in the show notes anyway. But again, thanks again, Astam. It's been fun, guys. That wraps up another episode of PunkCast for the week, and we'll be back with another episode in the coming week. Bye for now.